Ann Bocock, and welcome to Between the Covers. William F. Buckley Jr.'s influence cannot be overstated. He was a master of media. He started the National Review magazine at the age of 29. He wrote 50 books, nonfiction, as well as best-selling spy novels. His PBS television program, Firing Line, ran for more than 33 years, making Buckley the face of modern conservatism.
We're breaking tradition for the first time since Firing Line became a 1.5 hour program by taping 2 programs successively with Barry Goldwater. Why? Well, on this program it is the professional reasons that dominate. Firing Line isn't an interview program nor a public meeting place for old friends. This doesn't mean that I intend to obscure a 30-year-old friendship with my guest, merely that we are not going to spend time discussing fishing and hunting expeditions we've taken together, which won't be hard since we've never gone hunting or fishing together, though he did once fly me and my wife into the bowls of the Grand Canyon, which we survived.
This remarkable journey is detailed in a new book, A Man and His Presidents, The Political Odyssey of William F. Buckley, Jr. The author is Alvin S. Felsenburg. He was the principal spokesman for the 9/11 Commission. He also served in 2 presidential administrations. He teaches at the University of Pennsylvania's Annenberg School for Communications, and it's my pleasure to welcome the author, Alvin S. Felsenburg.
Thank you, Ann.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
We know that Buckley, in his day, who was this very handsome, motorcycle-riding, blonde man with a vocabulary, that I would need a dictionary to be able to converse with him. When he showed up on a college campus, and he did many, many such appearances, he was relegated to a rock star status. Well, today, you're teaching on college campuses. When you got to class, had they ever heard the name William F. Buckley?
Oh, I started teaching my current class at Penn the week he died. And I thought I'd start off, this is a communication class. He was a great communicator, we were just talking about. I asked if, how many people had heard of William F. Buckley Jr. All the hands went up. And that
Which is a good sign.
It was a wonderful sign. I mean, I said, gee, everything I've heard has been wrong. I mean, colleagues, administrators are all telling me, well, one thing about these millennials, they're not as interested in public affairs as your generation. You're out there trying to save the world. I mean, they just want to get a job, or more importantly, they just want to get out of here. They don't read the newspaper. What they get from the internet, and they don't get much of that. So you're going to be a little surprised. Well, I was surprised, but positively. I said, it's wonderful. It's not what they said. So then I should have quit there. But then I said, all right, what can you tell me about him? None of the hands went up. Complete silence. Except, this look of fear, like, don't call on me. Call on him, call on her, right? Don't call me. And I said, well, why did you all raise your hand? Well, it seemed the night that he passed away, they were besieged with these email blasts from various papers they have gone to, or websites they knew. Time, Washington Post, the Daily Pennsylvanian, even Sports Illustrated.
They would say their phones were blowing up.
Phones were blowing up. Yeah. Exactly right. Okay. And the only kind of personalities that get that kind of attention when they pass are ex-presidents and rock stars. Well, I thought about it for a minute, and I said, that is not a bad way to describe William F. Buckley Jr. as a cross between a rock star and an ex-president, after all. I mean, 10 presidents had heard of him. Many have wished they hadn't. He helped elect a few. He helped dethrone a few. But the one thing you couldn't do with William F. Buckley Jr. was ignore him very successfully. And on Rockstar, he first came into my life on television, like he was a child of television. And he was running for mayor of New York. And he didn't expect to win. He didn't want to win. He had some points to make. And it was an educational campaign, but he called it a paradigmatic campaign. So my first response was to ask my mother what that meant. and I got what all of you got, and I'm sure passed on to your children. Look it up, right? So the first thing he says, what would you do if you were elected? He said he would demand a recount if he was elected. Well, wow, this is the most refreshing thing I've seen in the public sector for a very long time. I was only 16 when I decided to keep an eye on him. And so, yes, he was very much that. He was shocked at the end of the campaign, which meant you talk about the rock star. I mean, before that, you know, he'd be on a motorcycle or walking or driving, and he'd have his briefcase, and he'd walk in, and he'd ask for the professor who's hosting him, and out they'd come like we did. Here he's coming in from LaGuardia Airport. He's mobbed at the airport.
Buckley came from this very large Catholic family. He was one of 10
That's right.
children. Now, we remember him as this multisyllabic, wonderful man. But it started somewhere with his principles and his ideals, and even the way he spoke had to have come from his family.
Yes. There's a lot about Buckley as a paradox. We think of him as one of the great communicators. He was. But he also was a master of multisyllabic words that many of his audience did not understand, including people like me when I was a teenager and I had to run to the dictionary whenever I heard him. He was quite wealthy. He exuded great wealth, great educational attainments. He spoke 3 languages before he would have been of kindergarten age. There's a line in Brideshead Revisited. He was selected by PBS at Alistair Cook's suggestion to introduce the BBC version of Brideshead Revisited into an American audience. And so they brought Our American Aristocrat to talk about an English Catholic, very important, aristocratic family. And in that line, the movie, from the book, there's a line that he never forgot. It said, "Our days in Arcadia were limited." Charles Ryder is complaining that the war is going to come and it's going to change the world we knew as children. Well, he wrote that he had a very idyllic childhood. Most people don't have horseback riding on Monday afternoon, sailing Tuesday afternoon, tennis Wednesday afternoon, piano lessons.
Prep school
prep
in
school,
the UK.
But also one of the earliest, the homeschooler, at least in the early grades. Yes, and of all places, he attended school in England at a Catholic boys' school called St. John Beaufort, which is a stone's throw from Eden. And there's a great story. This is for Catholic children, for Catholic boys. Now it's co-ed. And the headmaster, Buckley wrote, this is on the eve of World War II, 1939. They actually saw Chamberlain's plane flying in to the airport when his father was taking him to St. John Beaufort. And the headmaster of St. John Beaufort challenged the headmaster of Eton to a soccer match. You know, the young men of our school would like to challenge the young men of your school. So the head of Eton wrote back, "What is St. John Beaufort?" It's just a stone's throw away. So we said, well, we were what Eton is now. We used to train ministers for the king, but then there was Henry VIII and that terrible mess about religion and all of this. But that was his background. Most people forget he was a third generation American Irish story. They came from very, very little. His father was the son of, get this, the Duval County sheriff, Texas, in the Gunsmoke days in the 1890s. Imagine this. He had the Buckley way of being a nonconformist. He was the only sheep farmer in that part of Texas surrounded by cattle. He didn't do very well. There was not a great demand for Irish sweaters and all that. But rather than change, he went into politics. It's an incredible story. People look, yeah, he carried a gun. He brought in convicts. He knew Wyatt Earp. He knew the bounty hunter who brought in Billy the Kid. He would mesmerize the children of this town. His grandson becomes the host of Brideshead Revisited. It's an extraordinary story.
Before he becomes that, though, he's 18 years old. He finds himself in the Army, stationed as his basic training in Georgia. And at this point, everything begins to change when I'm reading this in your book, because this experience did what to him?
We would know it as culture shock. Remember, our days in Arcadia were limited. What does that mean? We had our own little world, very aware that other children were growing up without these privileges. There was a world depression on. It didn't affect the family, but you did read about it. You did hear about it. You did see newsreels about what was going on. You did pass some of these other unfortunate children and their families on the way to school, on the way to work for the father. So he's drafted. He knows he's going to be drafted. He goes to Millbrook. And drafted at 18. First time in his life he's thrown together with Poles from Chicago, Jewish kids from New York, other Irish lads, but not to the manner born. These were working class Irish. And he doesn't fit in very well. He never had to form those kind of friendships with people outside of the world he knew. It got a little tough. He didn't adapt. He used to, his father used to say, stop judging people only by their politics and their religion, and if you can't keep your opinion to yourself, keep it quiet. Don't remind them of the differences. Well, he learned this the hard way. I suspect there was a great deal of bullying and such, but one night he was cleaning up his commanding officer's desk, and he saw on it were various grades that he was getting in Officer Candidacy School, and he found out there was a big fight whether he should become a lieutenant. And the one person that he had some respect for was his commanding officer, who was an Irish Catholic, had also gone to Yale, a generation ahead of Buckley. That helped a lot, because he was an educated man. Takes him aside and said, do you understand that we're drafting these kids from farms and factories and taking them out of the lives that they knew? And as soon as they leave this place, within 2 weeks, some of them are going to come home dead. And you have to obey these orders if you want to be in command of life and death decisions over other people.
When I'm reading the book, it's so obvious to me that you're a Buckley fan. I mean, that is so clear. But as a reader, I have to tell you how impressed I am that you did not whitewash over the parts of him that were not very attractive and readers will not find attractive. Civil rights. Right. Explain to me, it wasn't until really the Birmingham bombing that killed the little girls that he could see this.
Yep. You know the episode that Ann's referring to, the Birmingham church bombing. Condi Rice was from Birmingham. She went to that Sunday school. 4 of those young girls she knew. Let's look at it this way from his world. And I was not, yes, it's very an unflattering part of his life, but before I tell it, let me just say the Buckley we saw on the set, the firing line, was not the Buckley of early adulthood and the early days of National Review.
Thank you for clarifying.
Oh, no, that's an important point. The man you saw was a decades-long work of self-creation. Men are not supposed to be very reflective, not supposed to be very, very sentimental. They're supposed to go out there in the world of business, dog eat dog and all of that. And, these are not supposed to be masculine qualities, but he spent a great deal of time looking at his weaknesses. He was very aware of his strengths, thank you very much. But most people are not very aware of their weaknesses and don't like to be reminded. You remember this church bombing happened a week after the March in Washington. Everybody thought that wonderful celebration of black and white and Charlton Heston and Paul Newman and Henry Belafonte, the first time I saw Peter, Paul, and Mary, all of that a week later, that bombing happens. You get back to that time. And he wrote a letter to his mother, and he said, where in our Catholic faith does it say that all mankind are created in God's image except African Americans? I never questioned it as a child. You never questioned it. Dad never questioned it. Our parish priest never questioned it. And when it came on the radio, what happened in Birmingham, that shook him to his core.
Alvin, there are chapters in this book about Ronald Reagan. There is no question about Buckley's influence on getting Reagan elected, and many years on that. I got to tell you what I found fascinating was Nancy Reagan and this incredible relationship between Buckley and Nancy Reagan.
Yes.
First of all, I read this. I can tell that you believe that she was a very underrated First Lady.
Oh, I do.
And tell me about this relationship first.
Well, I'll say of all the First Ladies in modern time, since Eleanor Roosevelt, Nancy may have been one of the more famous, but I think the one we know the least about. There was a very private side to Nancy and a very political side to Nancy. She was more than designer dresses and china. So what got my attention, and the story I'm going to tell you went on for 40 years, if you can think of this. 1966, and Buckley gets a letter. Now, they had met socially before, but he gets a letter. Dear Bill, you don't cover northern agricultural politics and controversies in California, Northern California agricultural issues. And then she wrote, why should you? But Ronnie's running for governor, and he's going to do a swing there next week. Here are all his position papers, the points that would be really helpful to mention in your column are underlined in red. Well, let's advance the story 25 years or so. He's now in the White House. And the one major policy dispute Buckley has with Reagan is Gorbachev and the signing of the IMF treaty. He still thinks Gorbachev is a communist. I'm not sure we can trust him. George Will even wrote an article suggesting that Ronald Reagan was probably out of his senses, posing then a communist, and he's disarming and getting rid of one family of nuclear weapons. What's wrong with this man? So this is going on the right. This is not a new story. And she says, Bill, I know you've been traveling. You may have missed these articles. Here are articles from 5 or 7 conservative authorities on why this bill isn't necessary, Bill.
She's clipping articles, sending them to Buckley.
Now, okay. a lot of letters, a lot of wonderful letters from Barbara Bush to Bill, and from some of the others occasionally, but not like that. And I'll bet if you get into the files, if you get into the presidential libraries and you start reading about the letters the two Bush first ladies had written, or any of the others, I don't think you'll find a letter like that.
You found a lot of correspondence.
They had a very long correspondence. Remember the controversy Reagan got into at Bitburg? It was going to commemorate the end of World War II, but more importantly, the rise of the alliance between democratic Germany and the United States. And Reagan's advance team went out there in the snow, and they didn't realize this was supposed to be a cemetery of their heroes, but it turned out to be a SF Waffen. People were buried there. Big controversy. Many survivors of the camps were very upset. Many veterans were very upset. There was a big fight in Congress whether he should go. 100 congressmen told him to cancel it. They joined it with a visit to a concentration camp where Reagan gave one of the more moving speeches of his presidency. I tell you all this because how are we going to get him out of it, Bill? What are we going to do? And he says, I've lined up the following people to help me write columns, and I've talked to 5 people. I've talked to Norman Podhoretz. I've talked to Irving Kristol. I talked to Henry Kissinger. So it isn't just coming out of my typewriter. This is what we do. Well, that's what I'm talking about. Whenever she needed something, Buckley was a one-man volunteer fire department, but she was the one doing it. I mean, she really was, Ronald Reagan was the chairman of the board of his presidency. She was really the chief operating officer of Ronald Reagan Productions. There's no question.
So Nancy was one of a kind.
One of a kind.
Absolutely.
That has been lost to history, and I hope we can recover it a little bit in here.
I hope so too. There's great chapters on Reagan, and as I said, totally interested in Nancy. We'd like to know what you're reading. We're reading your book. We want to know what you're reading now.
A couple of things. There's a wonderful book by a professor at the University of Virginia. His name is Hitchcock, and it's called The Age of Eisenhower. Eisenhower was smart enough to stay out of Vietnam. Eisenhower pushed a number of civil rights initiatives, one of which I mentioned. First president since the Civil War, second only to Grant, to send troops to the South to enforce civil rights for African Americans. A lot of things, and that, of course, that farewell address that reminded us about the fears of the military-industrial complex from one who certainly should know, having built it.
Fascinating. You know, if anybody should think that Buckley did not come out of the womb thinking the way that he did, they need to read the first part of your book, where at 6 years old, he's writing the King of England because he is very unhappy with what's going on in the world, and he's 6.
He wrote a letter to the King of England when he was at school in England, saying, well, you know, it's been almost 20 years. Isn't it time you paid America back for the debt you owe us in World War I?
Alvin, we have questions from the audience, and I'd like to start with our first one from Facebook, if that's okay with you. This is Joe T., and he wants to know if you can foresee anybody on the landscape now who could be the next Buckley.
That person will come. Sadly, I can't identify anybody on television who has the wit, humor, and I think above all, the ability to form friendships with people he disagreed with. You know, we have a time now where we have self-selected audiences, right? We all know who gravitates to Fox, who gravitates to MSNBC or whatever. He wanted to talk to the other side all the time. That was why I call it Firing Line. He had a debate show. Some of his best friends were people on the other side.
Could you please tell us a little about his personal life?
All right. He had a unforgettable wife, Patricia Taylor Buckley. Well, Patricia Buckley, the girl in the middle, was Patricia Taylor's roommate at Vassar. Well, so about, I don't know, 5 days into their first semester, she writes home and she says, they roomed me with this regal young lady from Vancouver, the perfect mate for Billy. Right? Well, so matchmaking sisters. And Pat was stunning. She was about 6 feet tall. Even in her day, that was considered tall for a woman. She was extraordinarily elegant. And she's also very, very beautiful. So there are many, many reasons that if she entered a room, people would turn around. But she was a tremendous wit in her own right and a personality in her own right. I don't know how feminists felt when her comment was, her career ambition was to be Mrs. William F. Buckley, Jr. She didn't realize that itself was a role. That itself would be that hard, okay? But the deal they had was she would play William F. Buckley, Jr. and entertain all of his editors and all of his visiting guests at home, tables of 10, wonderful dinners and great soirees. And he would have to be her, what do I call it, a schlepp-along when she was raising money for the Metropolitan Opera with all of her diamonds and jewels on, bedazzled jewelry, and also Sloan Kettering. Those are her two causes. Now, they had one son. You know about Christopher Buckley, who's an extraordinary novelist in his own right. And so that's where we are with that. So,
do you find your students interested in politics?
We all are influenced by peers, by our own peers, by our neighbors. Maybe there are some friendships in Washington that have shattered after the last election, but by the by, we tend to think the way our friends think. And of course, they're at an age where peer pressure is more powerful than will ever be again. They're more political, I think, than they were a few years ago. They're not complacent. I mean, they realize there's important things going on in the world. And a number of things have motivated them and galvanized them. I'm sure we're going to hear a lot about the events in Charlottesville. And we heard a great deal about what happened, the shootings that happened not far from here. And also what happened in the tragedy that happened in Charleston, South Carolina, in the church. And, you know, they're in the heart of Philadelphia, where I teach. So, I mean, a political city, important city. Much more than, I'd say, 5, 6, 7 years ago.
Research before the internet was an adventure. And you kind of alluded to that.
Yes.
And I'd like to know maybe if you could share one of the adventures or twists or turns that happened during that period.
Unlike what my students think, everything is not on the internet. Everything is not Google searchable. And Buckley left behind 5,000 boxes of personal correspondence to everyone from ordinary people like young me, okay, to former presidents of the United States, to royalty, to celebrities, to actors, actresses, poets. He wrote to the great minds and thinkers of the last century. I mean, it's a gold mine for writers. And one shock, and I'll end with this, one shock I've already told Ann about it, was finding my own letters to him when I was a teenager and a college student. And I asked to meet him at one point, and he had a secretary, a wonderful woman named Frances Bronson, who I'll always remember. She had a cigarette in each hand with a phone in each ear. and she wore these turbans to work, so I can't tell you if she was a redhead or brunette or gray, I don't know. We just always saw a turban. And I don't know, I think she took a shine to me at some point, so she writes on Buckley's letter, because I'd written several times to meet him, and she wrote, "Persistent, isn't he? 3 to 5 minutes, question mark. But find your own letter 50 years after you wrote it. That was quite a find.
We need to mention that Firing Line is going back, is back
Yes,
on
we
the
do.
air on
Yes,
PBS.
we do.
After what, 20
Yes,
years off the air?
20 years off the air. Margaret Hoover, who you may know from other networks, and she's been a political pundit herself. And she got the idea that we ought to bring Firing Line back. And they're working on their first season. She's had some extraordinary guests on. And I urge you all to try to follow that. Thank you for mentioning that.
Wonderful that it's back on the air.
I'm thrilled.
The book is A Man and His President, The Political Odyssey of William F. Buckley, Jr., Alvin S. Felsenberg. Thank you so much for shining the light on this fascinating man. I'm Ann Bocock. For more stories, please join me on the next Between the Covers.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.